G'day and welcome back to Australia's best classic mini YouTube channel, Tomo's Tune-Ups. So on this episode, we're back on the 1275, but this time we're going to be jumping onto the front suspension. We're going to reassemble everything in the front subframe along with the disc brake conversion kit. I've got some really cool components here that we're going to be installing. I'm going to go through with you what we're using, why we're installing it, and what they all do. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so here we are with the subframe. This has been powder coated, it's been sitting for quite some time, so it does have a couple little marks from where it's just been leaning up against something, but it's not going to affect the way that the car drives, nor is it going to affect the way we put everything together. So when things get powder coated, sometimes the bolt holes become a little bit smaller because they've got powder coating around the insides of them. It just becomes a little bit thicker with the paint, so you might just need to get a file or even just a drill and just slightly give it a bit of a ream on the inside just to open the holes back up to allow bolts or even components to go through. So every component that we have here, other than maybe one or two things, is brand new. So we've got a couple of pivot pins that go down the bottom. We have some heavy duty tie bars which are adjustable, and we also have a lower control arm which is also adjustable. These are a really cheap and easy thing to buy. This is what the lower control arm pivots off. So that's just going to go directly down through here. Now, I did a video earlier on, which you can see in the link in the description above, on how to assemble front suspension. So we're going to go through some of this stuff briefly. I'm going to explain what we've got and why we have it. Any good wheel liner will tell you that the more adjustments you have on a vehicle, the better it's going to not only handle, but also help to prolong tyre life. So when you only have one or two adjustments, like in some vehicles nowadays, it gets a little bit difficult to get the vehicle to drive straight and wear the tyres evenly. Some cars came out with all adjustments in terms of camber, caster and toe. Some cars just come out with a toe adjustment. Toe is only going to adjust the position of the steering wheel. So when you're driving down the road, it's going to be either left, right, straight ahead, upside down, whatever it may be, but toe is only going to adjust where the steering wheel sits. So having multiple adjustments, it's going to enable us to set this vehicle up exactly how we want it to suit the driving style and conditions that the customer is going to be using it for. Now, he's likely only going to be using this on the road, which isn't a drama whatsoever, but if you wanted to have a little bit more handling, we can stiffen the suspension, lower it a little bit, even just give it a little bit more camber so the turns will become a little bit tighter and be a little bit more performance-like, I guess, on the road. Anyone that drives a Mini or has driven a Mini knows that Minis do handle like they're on rails, so having fully adjustable suspension, you can fine-tune that suspension. Okay, so this is the lower control arm. So we've opted for everything being adjustable so we can get all of the adjustments out of it. And we've also opted to get, which the customer isn't aware of, but a set of rose joints. So a rose joint is very similar to a normal joint, but it enables greater movements and less wear on components. To be honest, this is the first time I've used rose joints, so I don't know the exact ins and outs of them, so I'm sure as we go along we can discover it together, or someone in the comment section can please let me know exactly why they are much better. But as I said, the customer doesn't know I've bought these. I thought it would be a nice little surprise for me to throw these in just for a little bit of added bling, but also performance as well. All right, so with the kit, you've got a couple little different spaces. I'd imagine they sit on the outside like this, followed by a washer, which would sit something like this, go on the outside to help protect it from any dust. And then it will sit on the outside just like that, I would imagine. Anyway, it would go one way or the other, so we can work that out. So being an adjustable lower control arm, this is what's going to give you camber, whether it be negative or positive, depending which way you wind it in or out. So what we need to do is loosen off that nut. We need to undo this, swap it over, and that's where this is going to go. So as you can see, they are quite different, but the thickness of the washers will go on the outside, which will then make up the clearance between the outside of the arm and the rose joint itself. All right, so I've just grabbed a little bit of copper paste and a couple of spanners to loosen off these lower arms. and remove the eyelet and then swap it over. Now, you probably can't see, but there's a little bit of copper paste on the inside here. We've spoken about this several times before. When you're doing things that have a lot of heat through them, for instance, exhaust manifold studs, or even just wheel nuts, it is a really good practice to put a little bit of copper paste on there to help prevent the wheel stud, the nuts, whatever it is that's getting a lot of heat through it, seizing. So we're going to put some on here. That way down the track we can ensure that if we need to loosen off, it's not going to be the hardest thing in the world to be able to loosen the nut and get some adjustment out of it. So as you can see, they are two different lengths. We are going to lose a little bit of adjustment out of this, but I wouldn't imagine we're going to be using the entire thread here. Considering how much thread I've got showing on mine, you probably only need maybe 20 mil of thread at the end to get your adjustment where you need it to be. Unless you're going to want to run 2.5 degrees negative camber, the amount of thread we have on there is probably going to be sufficient. All right, so first thing we do is put the nut on there. So we're going to wind it right to the end. Now we're going to set both sides exactly the same lengths, so both lower control arms and the adjustable tie bars. That way when you go to do the alignment, we know exactly where it needs to be. Now when we put the subframe in the car with the wheels on there and we go to turn lock to lock, we'll probably get a bit of an idea as to where it's going to be touching, and we can make some minor adjustments when it's sitting on the ground before we then drive it and get it wheel aligned. All right, so grab your copper paste and then just give it a good lather on there just to ensure that it's going to lubricate the thread quite a lot when the nut goes on and when it goes inside the arm. All right, so we're just going to make sure we run the washer again. The washer goes on there and then we just wind the arm back in there. So like I said, I'm going to set these both to the exact same position. So I've just wound that nut finger tight up against the end, and we're just going to slowly wind it all the way in until it comes to a stop. Oh, that's getting a bit tight now. So I would say somewhere in there, there's maybe a little bit of a burr inside the thread. So just wind that in nice and gently. We don't want to force this to a stop, but instead we just want to bring it to a stop and then maybe just back it off half a turn. Terrific. All right. So with these, we don't need to run the bushes that go in the, get out of there, the lower arms. So generally with these arms, you'd run a bush through here. That way when you go to get this pin, it then makes up the clearance. Because it is a snug fit inside the rose joint, this arm's going to slide all the way through and then it's going to make up the clearance difference. So we don't actually need any lower bushes in this pivot arm, but instead we do have a washer that's going to go on either side. Now, if someone watching this down the track tells me I'm doing it the wrong way, probably by the time you've seen this, the car's almost on the road and it's probably too late. Looking at this, it's probably facing the wrong way. I might just flip it around or do this, the other side the opposite way and see what it looks like. If it looks like it's going the right way, I'll leave it. If we think that it needs to go the other way, we can then just change it. So it just looks a bit odd to me that it steps down and then you have the surface of the arm just here. But look, that's probably going to be the way it goes, I reckon. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, cool. So first things first, take that back apart. Now the arm will only go in one way, like I've said in the previous video. There is a slight flat end at the end just there at the top at the 12 o'clock position, and that'll just line up with where it needs to be on here. So it'll be round all the way except at the top, I believe, by the look of it. So that flat piece is going to be facing the top, and that's what's going to lock it in position. So we're going to slide that through there, just make sure everything lines up before we put all that together. Yeah, so I just had to give that a little bit of a jiggle, clean up the thread a little bit because of the powder coating. Yeah, nice. All right, so that goes all the way in, wicked. So now we can fit the arm. Right, so just give it a bit of a wiggle, line up that pin to where it needs to be, pull it all the way home, and there they are. So they're super heavy duty, or just heavy duty, I guess. So once again, this is going to adjust your caster. So where the wheel sits in relation to the wheel arch, So by moving the caster forward or back, it's going to enable the car to steer better as well. So that's the reason why I've gone with these. And as I said before, it's also about the options of being able to adjust everything. The more adjustments we have, the better it's going to handle, and we're going to help to prevent any premature tire wear. Now, like I found out on my Mini when I built it many years ago, I put this bolt in the wrong way. Once I put it in, I could not get it out because the bolt came in from the top, which means in order for me to get it out, I need to take the lower control arm off from down in here, or even pull the hub from it. So make sure that when you do it, you put it in from the bottom. That way you can still remove it once it's in the car. So it'll slide directly in here, put it in from the bottom. Now this will have a nylock nut at the end as well, so that's going to lock it to the other side. So we're going to leave this adjustment here as whatever it is. We're going to loosen that nut, bring it till it stops, and that's where we're going to sit. Do have a nut to go at the end, so that's going to go on the front side of it. We'll leave that there for now. We'll come back and do the bushes a bit later on. So before we go any further, I just want to talk about the high-lows that we're putting in. These are Rip Speed high-lows. They are quite expensive compared to some of the cheaper stuff, but the customer wanted to go all out and spend as much money as they could on the best quality stuff that they could to fit in their car. Now the good thing about these is you can adjust them to where you want them to be. So it'll adjust the ride height, and along with the red dot rubber cone replacement, this is used for road and or rally application. So this will do exactly what he wants it to do. It's going to handle like a go-kart, handle like a Mini. So with upgraded rubber cones along with adjustable high-lows, we're going to get the optimum performance out of the suspension and the steering. So I'm having a bit of a drama putting the pin through the arm with the new bearings. I think somehow maybe they might have been undersized to begin with, or due to the powder coating on the inside of this, which I cleaned off before installing the bearings, it's maybe made the bearing a little bit tighter in there. So what I need to do is actually order another set of bearings, pull them out, and have a look, because I cannot get that pin in there whatsoever. I've even got one of my old pins that I used to punch out some of the bearings that were in there and even drive the new ones in, and I cannot for the life of me get it in there whatsoever without forcing it in there, and you shouldn't need to force something like this in through a bearing. So I'll get those sorted. In the meantime, we will get on to building the front brakes. If you haven't already seen the disc brake conversion kit I did quite some time ago, you will see it in the link in the description above. Alright, so there we have it. We have the entire front subframe assembled. The only thing we really need is the brake lines that run from the caliper up to the subframe, and the joining pipes that run along with the T-piece, or I guess L-shaped bracket, whatever you want to call it, that comes off here, runs up to the firewall. Other than that, pretty much everything is done on this that we can do at the moment. We do still have the upper control arms we need to get, along with a couple of new locating tabs that sit in the side here. I'll just come around here. As you can see, I'm a bit of barefoot billies. All right, so a couple other things that I want to get for this before we go any further is either new top control arms or at least new dowel pins. Over time, the dowel pins wear inside the upper control arm and they can come loose. Ask me how, and I'm glad you asked. I had my car come loose several times after I rebuilt it, only to find out that I need to replace the pins and the upper control arm because the pins had worn in such a fashion that it was no longer circular, they were oval. So that's it for the 1275 A+ engine. front disc brake conversion and suspension setup on this. We've got a couple extra things we're going to be doing when we install it in the car, such as new shocks, new shock mounts, the upper shock mount brackets, and just a heap of small fiddly bits. So probably next episode you'll see either the car being in my shed, or we'll be doing the rear subframe and doing the same thing. With these Rover Minis, the latest stuff, I've got a lot of guys probably watching in the UK, and even some probably people in the States will know that the Rovers are very different to the early models. Mine is just directly bolted to the body itself, whereas this one has rubber mounts that go between the subframe and the body. It gives it a little bit of more comfort, takes away a lot of the vibration, but the customer said, you know what, YOLO, let's send it, let's just solid mount it, which we're going to be doing, and same with the back as well. So the rear subframe, the only difference between the rear subframe and mine is that it has a larger bush at the front or the back, whichever one it is. I'm sure someone can correct me in the comments, but it is going to be fairly solid mounted as well. So everything that we can replace in here, like these bushes at the front, we're going to replace them with Nolithane. Because the car's red, the customer wants red with the majority of the bushes that we can do. So thanks heaps for watching, everyone. Stay tuned, there'll be plenty more classic mini stuff right here on Tomo's Tune Ups.